Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. And in a few minutes, we'll kick off the Global Climate Action High-Level Event on the COP27 Action Agenda, Progress and Priorities.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of His Excellency COP President Sameh Shukri, I will take the precedings of today as His Excellency is engaged with a number of bilaterals paving the way for the COP conclusion by tomorrow. So allow me to take the proceedings and to open the session. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, honored guests. This afternoon, we are honored to have with us Mr. Nigel Topping, COP26 high-level champion, Mr. Mahmoud Mohyeddin, COP27 high-level champion, Ms. Ina Bakova on behalf of Simon Steele, UN CCC Executive Secretary. It's my pleasure to welcome you at this closing session of the Global Climate Action high-level event. Let me take this opportunity to share some reflections on the importance of the role of the non-party stakeholders in implementing climate action and enhance ambition. It gives me great pleasure to be with you today at the Global Climate Action high-level event. Throughout it was 2 weeks, COP27 provided a very unique, diverse, and inclusive platform that brought together a diverse range of party and non-party actors. The support and the contribution of non-state actors, including cities, subnational regions, businessmen, investors, and civil society, were indeed instrumental to the success of COP27. The Global Climate Action Marrakesh Partnership Program at COP27 witnessed enriching and inspiring presentations, dialogues, and debates, which demonstrated that the non-state actors are integral players in the solutions roadmap that we need in order to effectively address the adverse impacts of climate change. I congratulate the high-level champions and the Marrakesh Partnership on successfully concluding the Global Climate Action Marrakesh Partnership Program. The different panels, sessions, and events held therein provided us with important ideas and recommendations on how to further mobilize and elevate the activities of non-state actors within the global climate action. Furthermore, the voices of non-state actors were integrated across all thematic days within the COP27 presidency program. It is imperative to build upon the non-state actors' achieved success that were showcased at COP27 and to address the current challenges they are facing in the fight against the climate crisis, with the aim of closing all related action gaps. It is also imperative to enhance partnership among party and non-party stakeholders in order to accelerate the climate action. The launch at the COP27 of Sharm el-Sheikh Adaptation Agenda as an outcome of constructive cooperation between COP27 presidency, the champions, and the Marrakesh Partnership is a successful example of such much needed partnership. COP27 presidency is looking forward to receiving a report from our partners in this agenda on the progress achieved in the implementation of the 30th Global Adaptation Outcome targets included therein before COP28. It is our aspiration that the Sharm el-Sheikh Adaptation Agenda represents a significant contribution to enhancing global action on adaptation and resilience as an utmost priority. I would like to seize this opportunity to call upon all parties and non-party stakeholders to get behind this critical agenda. Another important example of the constructive partnership between state and non-state actors is the successful convening of 5 regional forums before COP27 on climate initiatives to finance climate action and the SDGs. Through the partnership between the COP27 presidency, the 5 UN regional commissions, and the high-level climate champion, the the forums brought together representatives from governments, international, regional, and national financial institutions, and the private sector investments with the aim of accelerating public and private invest in concrete projects in climate mitigation and adaptation in line with the SDGs. The outcome of these forums were presented at COP27. We are keen to follow up on these outcomes with the aim of translating project pipelines from the concept phase through and to investment readiness and implementation. Furthermore, we are looking forward, together with our partners in this initiative, to convening the second edition of the regional forums next year. I would like to seize this opportunity to thank high-level champions of COP26 and COP27, Mr. Nigel Topping and Dr. Mahmoud Mohyeddin, for all their efforts in encouraging and mobilizing actions from non-state actors. I am confident that the high-level champions for COP27 and COP28 shall build upon and push forward the existing incentive level of dialogue and practical interaction with all non-state actors, the globe, to enhance the positive contribution to global climate action. I thank you. I would like to invite the master of the ceremony, Ms. Omneya Omrani, the COP27 News Envoy, who will lead us into the second session of the event, moving to the non-parties side. Ms. Omneya Omrani, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Excellencies. It's such an honor to be with you today and to begin the second part of the high-level event on the global climate action. And first of all, I would like to share that this important event has demonstrated the ambition and the energy of the non-state actors working collectively and charting a path towards the global climate goals. And this 2 weeks has demonstrated how each and every event at the action zone showed the ambition as well as the needs of the communities, health, food, and most importantly, the voices of children and youth, with the very first ever Children and Youth Pavilion, which is the first time in the history of COPs, and at the same time, it showed the importance of the voices of the leaders of today and tomorrow. We say that this COP is the implementation COP, and we have seen such evidence of progress demonstrated by the actions coming from the business, the finance, cities, and civil society organizations. Finally, I would like to showcase the closing moment of this part of the agenda with the key highlights coming from the last 2 weeks of the Global Climate Action events. Now let's take a look at it together. So I hope that you feel as inspired as I am. And I would like to introduce the moderator of the next segment, the former President of Ireland, the Paladin for Human Rights and Climate Justice, a very special youth ally, and the Chair of the Elders, Mary Robinson. I would like to welcome you to the floor.
Thank you very much, Omnia. All protocols observed. I am delighted to be here for this session because it's a session that I think is going to lift our hearts. We know there's been a great deal of discussion here as we come towards the end of COP27, of knowledge sharing, of commitment making. But for this session, we want to cast our minds to the future. What if our best times are still ahead of us? Can we get our heads around that and see how that would shape up? And if we can get our heads around it, why don't we talk about it more? You know, that's a question we should ask ourselves. We should be rushing to this future, but we don't talk about it enough. A future, of course, of clean energy, of regeneration, of, you know, bringing back more biological diversity, preventing extinction of species, etc. And I have a wonderful panel of, I'm glad to say, 3 women. Ah, I like that. Yeah, there'll be too many men around, you know? I like that. And I'm going to invite them one by one, and they're going to go to the podium, and they're going to tell their vision for the future, very briefly, and then they'll join me here. And when the 3 of us are sitting, we'll take up that further conversation. So please join me in welcoming the first, the environmental activist from Ecuador, Helena Gualinga.
Hello, can you hear me?
Go ahead, Helena.
Hello? Okay. Thank you, Mary, for introducing me. My vision of the future is of my community, the Quechua people of Sarayaku in the Ecuadorian Amazon. When I was a child, I ran barefoot between the tall samauma trees with a monkey on my head. Back then, I did not imagine a world where children in the Amazon are being poisoned by oil and mercury, where I fear my home might at any point be washed away by massive floods, where every day I fear that one of my friends or relatives might be killed for protecting our home, the living forest. I did not envision a world where we, the youth, are left to deal with the consequences of the irresponsibility of the adults and the so-called world leaders. I envision a future where we do not have to fear another flood, another typhoon, another fire, or fear finding another murdered protector of the Amazon. I envision a world where the children, your children, our children, do not have to fight for the future of humanity. I envision the living forest. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helena. And now I'm going to call on our second wonderful woman, the mayor of Lusaka, Chilando Chitangala. And I want her to share a snapshot of the future that she envisaged. So, Chilando?
Good evening. Good evening, thank you. I would like to share our future vision for our city, Lusaka, in the future now. The youths of Lusaka will have taken up the mantle to create jobs through the opportunities of the transition to the green economy, with recycling skills and also innovations. Women and communities are coming together to create a cleaner and more resilient city and benefiting from the opportunities that transition offers. The key to emancipation of women and young people has been turned by addressing the challenges presented by the crisis of climate now. Trust has been built with all people coming together. The city is growing and developing in a harmony with surroundings and respect of nature. We would like to see a clean, green, and healthy city with equal opportunities for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chalando. And now please join me in welcoming the CEO of the Climate Smart Accelerator, Raquel Moses, to share her vision.
Hello. 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 Yes, can you hear me? Wonderful. So my vision for the future is of hurricanes, floods, and wildfires. A hurricane of collaboration towards the creation of a net export of green hydrogen in the Caribbean, where we are not just collaborating towards the achievement of our goal of 90% renewable energy, but where we create a net export of green hydrogen towards supporting our tourism industry and creating a new opportunity out of this climate crisis. A flood of entrepreneurship, so that we are thinking about how are we creating new solutions that help to not just how do we avoid putting more carbon in the atmosphere, but how do we create solutions that absorb carbon, like using the remediation of plastic to improve our built environment and creating a better future for all that's more circular, more inclusive, that creates new jobs for Caribbean people. And finally, a wildfire of innovation towards new biodiversity, creating new solutions, creating a blue carbon exchange, and using that market to fund our climate adaptation. The future that I envision is one where my daughters have limitless possibilities, limitless access to opportunities, and that we share this beautiful future in our Caribbean home, where we're exporting solutions to the developed world and sharing the beauty that we experience every day. Thank you.
Well, now you've heard these three visions from these three wonderful women who are going to help me on this discussion, and I want to share with you where I got my own inspiration from. I got it from an Indigenous woman who was part of a women leaders network that I was involved in. And she said, her name is Jade Bigo. She's actually here at the COP. She's responsible, in fact, for the Indigenous pavilion. She's provided it. It's a lovely pavilion. And Jade said they have a saying in her tribe in New Mexico: what if our best days are still ahead of us? Our best times, are still ahead of us. And the truth is they are. But unfortunately, so are our worst times. And that's where we're heading. It doesn't seem very clever, does it? But it shows that we have a choice. We can either choose our best times, and I heard a lot of discussion about best times at this COP, and coalitions about best times, and commitments about best times at this COP. But unfortunately, because we haven't got the commitment yet to reduce the emissions by 45% in the next 45 degrees in the next 45% in the next 7 years, because it'll be 7 years to 2030. We're not on course. It's a hump, really, that we have to get over. So I'm going to come back to all three of you, and I'll begin with you, Raquel, because you talked about how do we create solutions. Now tell me about some of these solutions that you yourself feel you can be creating or you've seen created here at the COP.
The reality is the vision that I envision for the future isn't something that is, some sort of future state that we have to start. All of these things have started. We are already collaborating towards a clean energy export of green hydrogen to cover the last mile of decarbonization of many of these hard-to-abate sectors. We are already using plastic waste to turn that into strengthening concrete and improving our built environment. We're already seeing entrepreneurship taking things like sargassum, which the heating of the ocean is creating, and using that to create other solutions. So all of the things that we envision, it's not like an arm's length, like we don't know how we're going to get there. The challenge that we're having is that we just need to get there fast enough, and we need more support. But I'm a firm believer that the things that we focus on are the things that manifest. And if we don't start talking about the vision of the future that we're working towards versus the vision of the future that we're trying to avoid, we will inadvertently find ourselves heading towards the future that we're trying to avoid. Focus on the positives. Focus on the things that we can get done. Focus on the innovation. Focus on the youth and the new solutions. The future can be so much more beautiful than anything we would have experienced in the past. And we have to start thinking about where are we going and just stay laser focused on getting there.
Yes, could you pass the mic to Chalanda? Chalanda, you're the mayor of the city of Lusaka. What have mayors been talking about at this conference? What is the future that mayors see, and what are you doing about it?
Thank you. First of all, it's been nice to come to COP so that we learn what other cities are doing and what they are achieving. But for our city, what we've done is there's been a lot of stakeholder collaboration with other actors and community participation and engagement. And I think because we've been doing that, the people that are on the ground at the lower level take part in the policies and whatever we are doing. So they own the transition. They own it, and that has been good for us. For example, we are already engaging them, and they're taking part in action, climate action, environmental protection. And for environmental protection, we're planting trees with them, protecting our recharge areas. We're burying shallow wells. They are made because 70% of the city of Lusaka is peri-urban, and we live in unplanned settlement, informal settlement. So it means that they use shallow wells for drinking water. So we have to make them understand that we have to move away from that. Yeah. And then also strengthening partnerships. We're strengthening partnership with stakeholders. And also what we're doing is resource mobilization and implementation. Also improved governance through decentralization. So we're doing all that together as a city, and it's working.
And have you formed any new kind of useful partnerships or learning here at the COP that you can bring back to Lusaka?
Yes, we have, but obviously I've also told other cities what I've done. For example, I have what I call a junior mayor, a junior council, and other cities, we're happy to hear about it. And that's what I've been using for the youths to communicate. But I've also learned from other cities what they're doing. Yeah. Yes, and I think that is good for my city too. Yeah.
Thank you. Helena, I know this is a difficult conversation, I think, for you, because I want to recall our meeting in COP26. I got a message about the anger of indigenous women in the Amazon, that they had come so far to Glasgow and they weren't being heard. And would some of us women leaders provide them with a bit of space? And the first thing I was able to do was provide an opportunity for you to be on Sky Television. And you spoke beautifully about the problems of the Amazon. You're from Ecuador, part of the Amazon. And then we listened to other very angry women. I'd say they're probably still pretty angry, so I'm not going to ask you to be too rosy, because that's not right. I want you to tell us at the same time how you can see a better future, okay?
Yes, I remember meeting you last year. I think that for too long, Indigenous people have been completely invisibilized when it comes to climate politics. We don't realize that most of the forests and ecosystems that are still left on this planet, they are under Indigenous people's protection. And what I was talking about earlier, we're every day seeing Indigenous people all over the world and in the Amazon being murdered for this work. And there's complete silence on it in the international community, because this is something that happens every day, and not just the murders, but when the children are dying, poisoned by oil and mercury, poisoned by the fossil fuel industry, that is causing climate change. And to me, it's completely insane to come here, and we're still talking about that we're going to stop exploiting for oil in the future. It's something that should be completely illegal and criminal, because it's something that's already killing people directly, and it's been doing so for the last 50 years. We're seeing children in the Amazon dying of cancer because they're being polluted by oil. And I think it's even hard for us to imagine a future of hope when this is all we know. But I think from our territories, we also have a lot of beauty in the Amazon. I live in a community that's full of nature. We don't have roads there. We're completely surrounded by pristine rainforest. And we can see that it's possible to continue conserving nature. And when we're talking about solutions, nature needs to be at the heart and center of those solutions, because if we do not protect these forests, we don't even stand a chance against climate change. Without protecting indigenous people, we do not stand a chance against climate change. But we still have forests, and we still have indigenous people that are committed beyond any type of commitment that there is here. And so there is definitely hope for that, and we can continue doing that.
Thank you. Helena, it's because of your passion and your truth and the fact that indigenous peoples are saving the forests of the world and are the guardians of the seeds and are the hope for a better future if we only understand that we too are nature and make that real. So we have a challenge. As I mentioned, we can get to our best times, and there's a lot of work going on, as Raquel said, but we need to move the other agenda. The fact that we're not getting the commitments by governments to really ensure that we will get to our best future. When I was in Glasgow, I was very disheartened to learn from Climate Action Tracker that we were on course for a 2.4 degree world if every government that had made a pledge in their nationally determined contributions fully implemented that pledge. That's on course for a 2.4 degree world. I'm told by Climate Action Tracker, nothing has changed about that. We're still on course for a 2.4 degree world, which is not a livable world. We have to understand that. The more we go in through this century and see the climate shocks that are already affecting the world, north and south, the northern hemisphere has more recently had these shocks. The southern hemisphere has been having them for a long time. So I think we need to be in what I call moonshot time. And I explored with some women leaders, John F. Kennedy's moonshot. It was impossible to do what he said, that he would put a man on the moon. And it was done in 8 years. And then my women leader friends said, we don't really like that quite so much because it's very male and it's a bit competitive. Come up with a feminist version of the moonshot. And that is a version that we're going to talk about more and more. We call it Project Dandelion. The dandelion is the only flower that flowers on all 7 continents. It's a weed in many jurisdictions, including in my native Ireland. It's very resilient. If you try to get rid of the damn thing, it won't get rid of. At the same time, poets write about it. And how do you spread it? Children blow the seed. We need a movement for climate justice that moves several things that are wrong. One of them is the fact that we pay 1.8 trillion a year to what is harming it, or we invest in 1.7 trillion of investment in what is harming us. That's the B team of business leaders figure. about the subsidies mainly for fossil fuel. It is crazy. We need to shift that whole investment. So now I'm going to come back and I'm going to start again with you, Raquel. How are we going to get that momentum to match what we see here? What we see here would give you hope, because there's a lot of desire to have broad coalitions, even for the Amazon and for the three basins. There was a very good meeting of the three basins, and the possibility of a coalition of the three basins of the Amazon, Congo, and Indonesia. I think so. Raquel.
Yeah, I think it starts with us not vilifying each other. I mean, we talk about the fossil fuel subsidies, but we can put them out of business at any time that we choose to act differently, to use different forms of transportation. And so it is about having those conversations. We meet a lot with the fossil fuel industry and, about how do we help them to transition. It's an easier conversation, granted, in Trinidad and Tobago, where our fossil fuel resources are on the decline. But I think we need to understand that this requires that we bring everybody along, and we can't afford to make enemies in this fight. We only need friends. So we need to figure out, how do we bridge the gaps? And I think that the private sector has such a massive role to play. Governments will follow where their people lead them, and they will follow what the private sector is doing. And so we have to just figure out, how do we keep everyone in line and talk them through what are the barriers that you are facing and how do we overcome them?
Yes, I do agree. And actually, this idea of bringing women leaders together to be women-led isn't meaning women only. So we want to lead, we want to get the private sector in, we want to get young climate activists who are already giving a lead, indigenous communities, artists, etc. But we just need a big, huge voice now. And I want to know from you, Chelando, how cities can help. I'm hearing more and more about the C40 cities, what they're doing, other groups. Is Lusaka involved in, and do you feel the power of cities to show that you're implementing and get your voice out?
Thank you. Yes, we are creating platforms, different kind of platforms for planning and decision making. For example, in Lusaka now, for security, water protection, like to protect our well fields and just groundwater, we work with Lucy. An initiative that has been building capacity at the ground level. But not only that, we have other stakeholders as well who come on board with us and work with us. So Lucy has got about 33 members, and our government is a member. So we work with all of them, strengthening governance structures such as the WDCs, we who are Ward Development Committees that we work with at the ground level. But for us to get to where we want to get to, I think cities need capacity building and support financially. And I think it's very important that the financiers understand that cities need to be financed directly. I think we cannot be now be financed through a national government. I think we want to be financed directly, because we are the ones that understand and work with the people right there at the ground level. So we understand the problems much better, and we need to take action now.
That's a point I've heard from a lot of representatives of cities, a lot of mayors. I could do so much more if I could get the direct financing to me that didn't have to come through central government and not come in some instances, etc. Yeah, that's a good point. Helena, I want to ask you whether you've been a climate activist, you've been with your sister speaking for women, in particular women and children and young people in the Amazon. Can you believe that we can have a real climate movement with a moonshot mentality of urgency that will reduce carbon emissions by 45% by 2030, 7 years away, that will regenerate, begin the real process of learning the wisdom of the indigenous communities that we all feel, I am nature? Do you believe we can do that?
Well, I think there's a fundamental problem that we need to solve first, and it's the mindset and the culture that we have formed, which is a culture and a mindset of exploiting Earth and exploiting people, or just look at how we treat animals, how we treat other people, and how we treat nature. And if we do not have that shift in mindset, that's really, really hard. In my community, we have this proposal of the living forest, and that's what I envision also, where we see the forest as a living being. And therefore, we're now also pushing for this, for forest to have rights, legal rights. And I think that shifts the entire conversation, where living forest is more valued than a dead forest, a cut down forest. But I think we also need to remind ourselves of the historic responsibility of wealthy countries when it comes to the damage that has been done to the rainforest and the global south. And if they don't take historic responsibility and keep delaying or blocking, for example, loss and damage, that future will not be possible. But as I said, we still have enough for us to keep pushing for change.
Yes, it was good that loss and damage got on the agenda at the very start of this COP, and it is very, very important that there is a very good outcome of loss and damage. The elders have been very strongly advocating. We need financing, we need real money for frontline vulnerable communities, for what's happening in the Amazon, etc. And people have been talking about it for a long time. It didn't get properly onto the agenda. This is the African COP, and hopefully we'll see a really good, strong cover decision and good outcome. But that's for the negotiators. We're charged with a future here, and we only have 5 minutes left to really plot that future. Raquel, can I ask you, there have been quite a few commitments of coalitions. Are you seeing enough coalitions between governments and the private sector, and in that, governments from different parts of the world and the private sector?
Enough is such a high bar. We're seeing a lot of momentum towards that collaboration for sure, but enough, no, not nearly enough. But I think the private sector is engaged and really willing and wanting to support this cause from their own perspective. And so I think it's really important that governments open up and indicate where are the areas that they need support. We're seeing collaborations on green ports, for example. There have been many discussions this week with a number of public and private sector partners about the building of green ports. How do we decarbonize the maritime industry? How do we decarbonize the aviation industry? And there are, that conversation can't take place without the private sector. And they're the ones who are going to seek economic opportunities in this transition. And back to your point, Helena, I absolutely agree. We need a complete reformation of how we think about these things. And it requires that we have more women in leadership and more equity and more justice. And that will help us to bridge those gaps and think about things in a completely transformed way that will lead to these outcomes that we're seeking.
Chalando, do you think the voice of cities is heard enough at these COPs? The voice of mayors like you?
Unfortunately, I'll say not really, because time and again we've been talking about the same thing over and over, and then I think it's been very unfortunate because the same things that we've talked about in other summits, other conferences are the same things that we're talking about even at this COP. So I hope that from now onwards, the future will have a new story, because where we are at now, that's not where we should be in the next 7 years. So I hope the story will change, because we need a lot of support as cities. And they must take note, like I said, support the cities directly, because we are the ones that take care of you, the people. Thank you.
Elena, I think I have to ask you, what is the cover decision you want to see coming out of here? What should it include coming out of COP27? Write it for me.
That's big. I think that right now this COP is a COP that should have happened 30 years ago, right? When the island nations started to bring up loss and damage That's a conversation that should have been held 30 years ago. We're 30 years late on climate action. So what I want to see that there is responsibility taken, the historic responsibility is taken here, and that there is reparation, not just compensation, but that there is a reparation for those countries that have been suffering from climate change. And we need to stop delaying the date when we end fossil fuel, when we stop using fossil fuel. And I think we've been delaying it for too long. So I hope it's from the bottom of my heart that we can realize that that was something that should have been done yesterday.
Let's talk about phasing down not just coal, but oil and gas. Yes. Would you like to see that expressly in the cover decision?
Yes.
Good. Anything else?
No?
Anything else? Anything else?
A lot else.
Michael.
Yeah. I think also we need to recognize the importance of indigenous people in these conversations. We've been also left out for too long, and that's also what has delayed the conversation. That's what it has taken 30 years to come to get to this COP. So let's. We're really, really hoping for good outcomes of COP27.
I'm glad that we could talk about the future, but also talk about responsibility and talk about what has not happened and talk about, because both are relevant to this COP. We have to imagine more this future that's around the corner if we get over the hump, and it's an important hump and it's a responsibility hump of getting the world into clean energy. Think of the difference that would make to this continent. Imagine if the 600 million who never switch the switch for electricity, the 900 million who still cook on dirty cooking, can have their clean cooking. Imagine the difference it would make to the women involved in particular, their time, etc. Imagine, keep on imagining, because we've got to make it happen. Thank you, please. Please thank our great panel here, and keep imagining.
Thank you so much, Mary, and all the other panelists for such an insightful and a very powerful discussion. And now I would like to invite our high-level champions to share their key takeaways from the last 2 weeks. But first of all, join me in welcoming His Excellency, Dr. Mahmoud Mohiuddin, who's going to share with us what has been done, what is still yet to go, and what we are hoping in the journey to COP28.
Thank you very much, Omnia, for this introduction. President Robinson, Excellencies, Ambassador Ayman Sarwat, all protocols observed. I enjoyed very much the discussion earlier, to the extent that I wanted to change my talking points again. But this is not possible at this stage. But let me share some reflections on what was said. And as I liked the questions, I liked as well the very specific answers to the questions on the expectations, on what's needed really to have another moonshot. And it's a great lesson from history and the leadership of President Kennedy. We have more finance than in the 1960s. We have better knowledge, research and development, definitely more than 1960s. But there is something that is very much missing, which is reflected in the words of the Secretary General, as we are suffering from a deficit in trust because of lack of leadership and what we require more in order to invest in behavioral change where it matters. While finance is a constraint, science is available but it's not shared. But what could really facilitate our pathways towards climate action, effective implementation for the measure that we all agree on is basically the bridging of a bigger gap than the gap in finance, which is requiring change in behavior. So it looks like a couple of hours passed since I addressed with Nigel this gathering, but it was basically on the opening event, making good on promises. I asked then what is inefficient, insufficient, and unfair. At the time, I was talking about climate and development finance, but I could have been talking about the current state of climate action at large across the board, about all the promises that have been left unfulfilled. There is still a long way left to go, but I'm pleased to say that there have been positive developments and signals in the last 2 weeks here in Sharm el-Sheikh. With the support of the Secretariat, the Marrakesh Partnership, the Climate Action Community, and the Climate Champions team, we have made progress on several fronts that can take hours to reflect on you. There is long version, short version. There is an executive summary that you can check, and there is the long version of it that is available on the website. But I'll give some quick summaries of what had been achieved so far and how can we build on that further for the future, the near future. For the first time at the COP, we put youth at the heart of climate action with the launch of the Children and Youth Pavilion. But before that, there was a very good decision by the presidency of the COP to have the first ever youth envoy. And where is Umnea here? Is still, or she disappeared in us? Yeah, so that was a very great choice, and I'm happy that Egypt had this introduction that I think it will be followed in the future. There was something else that we focused not just on the very able youth that are not just coming with complaints but solutions for the future, including children, through the collaboration of the Climate Champions team and the presidency of the COP. We invited 7 children from around the world, and many of them, actually I would say all of them, inspired us, and they are coming with their solutions. Knowledge sharing, ideas to develop the knowledge, iPod work, podcasting, applications, and doing more with communities and developing applications. For practical issues of big concern, especially in underprivileged areas. For the first time as well, at the COP, in close partnership with the presidency of the COP, under the call for action, together for implementation, we put adaptation action at the forefront of the launch of the Sharm el-Sheikh Adaptation Agenda. This adaptation agenda is the first comprehensive global plan to rally both states and non-state actors behind a shared set of 30 adaptation outcomes, 5 impact systems to work on: food and agriculture, water and nature, coastal and oceans areas, human settlements and infrastructure, and including enabling solutions for planning and finance. This agenda is a powerful joint effort with the presidency to focus on near-term adaptation. In a brief discussion with the president of the COP, they are expecting, as a team and as presidency, actions, and this is what will happen starting next week, what will be the areas of work, including projectizing many of these areas of work going forward and reporting regularly on them. For the first time as well at COP, we brought together a global pipeline of implementable, financeable, and investable projects. I didn't mention bankable because we are too much dependent on debt instruments. We cannot be more indebted than what we are today. So the idea is to partner with investors, long-term finance, in order to unlock climate finance through a massive mobilization of private and public finance for climate action solutions. Mitigation is getting some decent traction in some areas, but not across the board. But definitely we need to work more on adaptation and resilience. We cannot be stopping at the 2% share of climate finance as part of global finance. This needs to change. This needs regulations, better design of projects, better incentives, and better partnerships. And we're working on that. Our new report, Assets to Flows, shows what it will take to convert financial assets into flows, derived from our series of regional finance forum. This was a very important initiative, and I'm happy with the partnership with the UN system, with the regional economic commissions, with the presidency of COP27, and for my good friend as well, Mark Carney, because he put this strong question to many of us. We have the funds, can we see the pipeline of projects? And that got us very active to mobilize a list of investable projects, and we presented a number of them here at the COP through a compendium of projects covering mitigation, adaptation, possibilities of engagement in addition to public-private partnership with impact on local communities, and managing as well a transition that should be just when we are working on that. We put Africa and the Africans at the center of COP, and I really commend the work of the African leaders when they considered an implementation COP to be an African COP. So this is basically a COP for all of the world, but for Africans to benefit from it, it should be focusing on implementation and to push the action agenda further. So very specific areas of work here. I'm very proud of the work of the team on this area of work. I'm happy to see the head of the Financial Regulatory Authority with us as well, because the first actionable approach that we introduced with the establishment of the first Africa carbon market through the Africa Carbon Markets Initiative by the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet, Sustainable Energy for All, the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, and many other partners from the regulatory agencies, private sector, and we launched that initiative in the presence of 4 heads of state and more than 12 ministers and many private sector participants. The Africa Climate Risk Facility is an initiative of the Nairobi Declaration on Sustainable Insurance. It has now more than $14 billion of cover for climate risk by 2030. It's the first time ever that signatories have made this financial commitment, and this will benefit the Africans focusing on adaptation, benefiting from a data set that will be built even further through good utilization of the data that will come from the early warning system that had been advanced and initiated by the UN system after the good call by the Secretary General of the United Nations on this front. Local initiatives. We launched an unprecedented local initiative under the auspices of the President of Egypt, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, offering an example to be replicated, hopefully, regionally and internationally in future COPs. It's about localization of climate action. And if I answered a global figure with my team and Nigel, of course, who happened to be Mark Carney in the first question, but actually that question came from a fellow villager from the Egyptian Delta, wondering why we have this COP. What's in it for us to have climate action? So I'm happy that we had an initiative that included 27 governors, 7 ministers, prime minister coordinating the work. So it got the whole country to respond to this question, what's in it for us? We had 6,281 projects that I consider them as answers to this important question, what's in it for us? I am happy to see the 18 winning projects. We just saw some of them today here in the blue zone and earlier in the green zone. They give us hope. And they are working in all areas of climate. They don't use the sophisticated terms, but they use their knowledge and advancement in finance and mobilization of resources to give us projects focusing on solutions, on recycling, on energy, on adaptation, on dealing with pollution and decreasing emissions and biodiversity. We are fully committed to ensuring integrity in everything we do. That's why we welcome the new report, the Net Zero High-Level Expert Group, and its recommendations, that we are going to be working with the teams, including from the UN system, in order to advance the compliance with these new recommendations to make sure that we are dealing effectively with greenwashing. People brag too much about greenwashing, but I'm happy to say as well that there is some serious work in making finance available, because the Africans and developing economies do not just suffer from greenwashing, but they suffer from green exclusion, because there is higher cost of obtaining finance from the markets. We are pleased as well to see a report by the independent high-level expert group on climate finance, commissioned by the president of COP26 and the president of COP27. It came out under the title of Finance for Action, and this is finance for climate action and finance for development action, and there is no conflict or trade-off or dichotomy between the actions that are required for climate or for development. There are important recommendations which we are operationalizing. Many of us were in the room when Prime Minister Motley challenged Maya Motley when she challenged the global financial system and trying to reform what should be reformed and to make sure that the multilateral finance system is fit for purpose. We heard as well Professor Sachs in the initiative with the UN on accelerating finance for the sustainable development, the accelerator. We have seen many proposals, including the one from Vera Songwe and Nick Stern that I just mentioned. So how to operationalize that? Let me just give you a proposal. And this proposal will be either accepted, which will be making many people happy, or rejected. But if it is rejected, we would really hope to see something better than this. So what's the proposal then? Given that I described, and this is my description, I don't commit the climate champions for that, the financial system in the world that is to be inefficient, insufficient, and unfair, what will make it different then? So we need to have 10 years grace period for all climate finance to be adopted by multilateral development banks. We need to add to that at least 20 years of repayment period. That will give us a total of 30-year maturity period, but we need to be charged a modest figure of 1%. That's why I call it the 1% for the 1.5 degrees proposal, because I'm not really seeing money flowing from the 100 billion. I'm seeing multiples of this figure as the gap of finance. And that proposal, if it is going to be adopted by the G7 and members of the G20 and the shareholders of the IFIs, it may make the transformation that would require. It's not going just to be the finance, it will be coupled with technical assistance and capacity development. So let me, very kind of you, thank you. So somebody may have done the math already and compared these figures to the costly finance that is available for developing economies. And the proposal here is to extend these terms not just to the low-income countries that need all the help and support, but we need that to be extended as well to low-middle-income countries. I was surprised to see that many, or to find people assuming that African countries are just a bunch of low-income countries. We have low-income countries aspiring to graduate from this category. We have low-middle-income countries that are trying to push finance further for the future. And I see my good friend Bugulu here give me a signal, which I'll respect in a few seconds, that my time is up. And actually, our time is up. It's not just me in my words, but it's basically our time is up in our fight against climate change. And that gets me into the very final words. And I hope from this gathering today, our good negotiators will listen, that we cannot afford some more complications on the way, on finance, on science, and pushing further the climate action. We need more finance for mitigation, we need decent finance for adaptation, and we need full recognition of the importance of the file on loss and damage, because we cannot do without. So, returning to my question, is climate action inefficient, insufficient, and unfair? So far it is. And while there is still much more to be done, I do take confidence what has been achieved in these last 2 weeks to turn the dial gives us hope. And the hope is not just from the leaders, but mainly from the youth and the children who have the right to live and to live in dignified life. I also take confidence that it is by collaborating with the parties, by bridging the work of non-state actors with governmental actions, we can definitely accelerate the progress on climate and all sustainable development goals. I hope then that we can indeed make climate action efficient, sufficient, unfair, and fair, Still unfairness is dominating even my thinking, but let's be optimistic, and we see the fairness coming through better collaboration. Thank you so much. Right. Well, it gives me great pleasure to take a few seconds, not few hours or minutes, to introduce a friend and a colleague and a champion who spent a great deal of his life, dedication, efforts, tirelessly to deliver and help deliver what we have been achieving. And despite the fact that he has only minutes and hours left in his service to the world, being a climate champion, I'm putting a bet that he will be with us in different forms and hats in order to make sure that what he started and completed with many other champions before him is going to continue on the right path. Nigel Topping, our climate champion for Glasgow. I call him Nigel the Sixth because he put many benchmarks to be followed by the Nigels of the future, but I'm happy to give him the floor now. But before that, given that it will be, you can join that. Because that could be the last time that he will be seeing the teams represented here, the team of the climate champion. Can I ask them please to stand up to be seen, not just by Nigel knows you all, but for all of those who are in this room to recognize your work. Thank you so much. Nigel, the floor is yours.
Shukran, Sadiqi Mahmoud. Ambassador Ayman, President Mary Robinson, Your Excellencies, friends. Last week I met the 7 young children that Mahmoud talked about, that the high-level champions supported in coming to COP27. And my friend Rama sat them all down and sat me in front of them, and he told them that I worked for them, that they were my boss. And he asked them to interview me. They asked great questions, of course, but what struck me most was Genia, a 12-year-old boy from the Torres Strait Islands, who looked me in the eye and said, "I don't want to be a refugee." So as we near the close of COP27 and I reflect on my 3 years in this role and our collective task and responsibility to ensure a just outcome for the vulnerable people of our world, for the young people of our world. And with Genia's words fresh in my memory, 3 things are top of mind: the importance of the truth, the sources of hope, and the power of radical collaboration. The truth is that 1.5 degrees C is not a target. The Earth system scientists remind us 1.5 degrees C is a limit. It's a limit anchored in physics beyond which we unleash tipping points to hell. The truth is that non-state actors must be held accountable for delivering on their commitments, and that we increasingly have the tools to do that. The truth is that voluntary action alone, although welcomed, will not get us to where we need to be. So we must move quickly from a groundswell of voluntary momentum into the ground rules for the global economy. The truth is that we are far, far off track from where we need to be. But we must not give up hope. We must imagine the better times ahead that Mary describes and unleash the incredible ingenuity of humankind. What gives me hope is the action of thousands of communities, of businesses, of cities and states across the world. What gives me hope is the evidence of change that we see coming from these actions. And what gives me hope is the knowledge that this change can become transformational. We see a critical mass of non-state actors acting to keep 1.5 alive while working with the most vulnerable communities to adapt and build resilience. We see evidence of innovation on mitigation and adaptation everywhere. And when you put it together, it matters. And in this crucial year of taking stock on global action by countries, we know that commitments made by non-state actors will go way beyond what's currently accounted for in NDCs if delivered and scaled up at a sectoral level. What gives me hope is the knowledge that this is happening now. The past 5 years have confirmed the pattern of the transition to the net zero economy is following a kind of Moore's law of industrial transformation, where technology deployment goes up exponentially as costs come down in a predictable way, a way we've seen in such transformations historically many times. From renewables that are now the cheapest form of electricity almost everywhere in the world, to electric vehicle sales increasing over 60% each year, we're seeing this same story of exponential transformation emerging in sector after sector, from steel to shipping, from hydrogen to cement. But we don't see it in most of the reports because it's still under the radar. And we also see the Global South taking a lead, with launches here at COP27 of the African Just and Affordable Energy Transition Initiative, the Africa Food Systems Transformation Initiative, the African Net Zero Concrete Group, the African Carbon Markets Initiative, and momentum by the 6 African nations leading the Africa Green Hydrogen Alliance to sustainably industrialize Africa with plans that could add up to 12% to their current GDP. This is the breakthrough agenda, where countries and non-state actors representing over 50% of the world's economy are developing short-term plans and implementing them to drive demand, to unlock investment, to scale up production and bring down the cost of net zero technologies, to make the clean option the cheapest option everywhere in the world by 2030. And we're excited to see the same pragmatic engineering mindset being applied at this COP to adaptation and resilience, with the launch of the Sharm el-Sheikh Adaptation Agenda in partnership with the Egyptian COP27 presidency, all the Race to Resilience partners, the high-level champions in the Marrakesh Partnership. And all this momentum is driven by the power of radical collaboration, when governments at all levels, the private sector and communities unite around shared goals and shared values and bring their unique skills and expertise and resources to problem solve together. This experience of exponential growth beating linear change needs to be firmly understood as part of the global stocktake next year. Let me give you 2 examples of the kind of radical collaboration we've seen in the last week. The Roof Over Our Head initiative, launched at the Resilience Hub by our dear friend Sheila Patel, a global grassroots women-led program. Mary launched it officially. But it's a women-led program that's harnessing the skills of those women in informal settlements and the engineers, builders, architects, and city governments to help millions living in informal settlements build climate-resilient homes. Or the Mangrove Breakthrough, bringing together NGOs, governments, industry, scientists, coastal communities to mobilize $4 billion by 2030 to conserve and revitalize coastal ecosystems, to protect 15 million hectares of mangroves and generate millions of jobs by 2030. As my good friend Mahmoud reminds us, these actions are not only good for climate, they are good for sustainable development. And we know that the net zero nature positive pathway is the development story of the 21st century. As this is the final time that I will address you as parties in this role, I want to thank you for the support in creating the high-level champions role, the Marrakesh partnership, and the encouragement that you have given us to be bold and to innovate. I want to thank in particular the Egyptian presidency of COP27 and Mahmoud for our partnership to continue this spirit of boldness and innovation. And parties, I want to implore you, please look at the transformational potential of the Sharm el-Sheikh adaptation agenda and the breakthrough agenda. Take courage from the thousands of organizations in the Race to Zero and Race to Resilience and the Glasgow Finance Alliance for Net Zero. Take confidence from the amazing team supporting current and future champions and the fantastic family of Marrakesh partners, all working to implement the 5-year plan we presented and you welcomed last year to support you in reaching the goals of the Paris Agreement. Take heart and let's use the global stocktake to find opportunities to embed this momentum in bolder national plans. We can transform so much faster if we dare to imagine a better future and if you back your people, your businesses and your banks, your indigenous peoples and your cities, your engineers and your farmers, your children, your young people, your elders. They are amazing. Unleash them to deliver our moonshot, or perhaps I should say our Project Dandelion, not a moonshot to demonstrate one country's industrial prowess, but a Project Dandelion to ensure Guinea does not become a refugee, and to ensure that we save everyone and everything we hold so dear. A moonshot or a Project Dandelion to ensure that indeed our best times are ahead of us. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much to both high-level champions. You really are truly champions of climate action, and we are very inspired and grateful for you. Now I'd like to invite another special guest. We have with us the Special Advisor to the United Nations Secretary General on Climate Action and Just Transition, Mr. Selwyn Hart. Join me in welcoming him on the stage.
Thank you. Really great to be here with all of you. And of course, first let me thank the Egyptian presidency for hosting this COP and for your excellent efforts at guiding parties and non-party stakeholders, of course, through this really complex process. I also wish to pay tribute to my two good friends, Nigel and Mahmoud, for their leadership at collaboration, at facilitating collaboration with non-state actors. I've been in this process for way too long, and I am delighted to see how COPs have evolved from simply being places where tired negotiators hammer out commas and sentences and paragraphs to a truly global mobilization effort to advance our global climate goals. And I'm so deeply encouraged by the level of ambition and energy in this room, It's great to see so many committed climate activists and leaders. At this COP, we've seen and heard from civil society, from young people, indigenous communities, and women's groups. Increased action by non-party stakeholders is the driving force to show governments that higher ambition is possible. And I wish to be blunt with you. We know that every indicator on climate is heading in the wrong direction. Global emissions are at their highest level in human history, and they continue to rise. We know that the 1.5 degree goal of the Paris Agreement, or that 1.5 degree limit, is in danger. We also know that as emissions continue to rise, impacts are getting worse and worse. And the unfortunate paradox of the global climate crisis is that if you are living in Asia, in South or Central America, in Africa, or on a small island developing state, you are 15 times more likely to die from a climate impact. So we're seeing global emissions rise, we're seeing impacts continue to increase, and therefore our challenge must be to bend the global emissions curve urgently, but simultaneously scale up support to protect those on the front lines of the climate crisis. Just ahead of this COP, UNEP issued its emissions gap report, which clearly shows that the world needs at least $340 billion a year by 2030 in order to meet the adaptation needs of the developing world. And right now, we're mobilizing less than a tenth of that. Adaptation support should not be seen as charity, or addressing loss and damage should not be seen as a favor to the developing world. It's a moral obligation. So therefore, COP27 must lay the foundation for accelerated climate action. We need to get the world back on track. The good news is that we have the tools, both technological and financial, to achieve our climate goals. Renewable energy. Renewable energy. We need to jumpstart and accelerate a renewable energy revolution. But a renewable energy revolution that ensures fairness and justice to all. Africa, the continent that this COP is being held, has 60% of the world's solar capacity. Yet Africa attracts a mere 1% of investments in renewable energy. 1%, but with 60% of the world's capacity for solar. Let's compare Denmark and Algeria. Denmark has some of the worst potential for clean energy, for renewable energy. Algeria has 70 times more potential for renewable energy, yet Denmark has 7 times more installed solar capacity, 7 times more. The biggest obstacle to scaled up renewable energy investments in the developing world is the cost of capital. The cost of capital is at times 7 times higher in the developing world. I've said this before, Mahmoud, I'm sure you've heard it in multiple rooms. The world needs to throw the equivalent of the kitchen sink, the financial kitchen sink at this challenge. We need to ensure that's the only way that the transition to net zero will be fair. Developing countries deserve a fair deal to accelerate the transition to a renewable energy future. Colleagues and friends, as Mahmoud indicated, a year ago, the Secretary General established a group of experts to look at the net zero commitments of non-state actors. One of the most welcome shifts that we've seen in recent years has been the number of non-state actors and private sector entities pledging to achieve net zero by 2050. A lot of that work is due to you, Nigel, and your fantastic team. However, not all net zero commitments or not all net zero pledges are created equally. I know that many of you in this room are committed and are doing the right thing. And it's unfair to you and those that are doing the right thing to be lumped together or categorized or lumped together with those who simply want to engage in public relations and greenwashing. It's unfair to you, extremely unfair to you. And this is why the Secretary General created this group, this expert group. And less than 1 week ago, they published a comprehensive report, which in our view represents the how-to guide to ensure credible accounting net zero pledges. I cannot do justice to the richness of the report in simply a few minutes, and I know my time is running out. I see the signals. But it includes very clear guidance on setting robust net zero emission targets aligned with the 1.5 degree pathways. It clearly states that net zero pledges must be in line with the IPCC scenarios limiting warming to 1.5 degrees with ambitious interim targets every 5 years. Pledges must be accompanied by detailed transition plans and concrete policies and actions supported by regular reporting. These plans must be publicly available. Critically, pledges must cover all scopes of greenhouse gas emissions. For businesses, this means all direct emissions. For financial institutions, means all finance activities, and for cities, it means all territorial emissions. So the message is clear to all those managing existing voluntary initiatives, including CEOs and mayors, governors. Abide by the standards and update your guidelines right away, and certainly no later by COP28. And Mahmoud, really delighted to hear your commitment to take this forward. So colleagues, every government, every business, every investor, every institution must step up. This is the only way we will achieve the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals while securing a future, a livable future for all. Colleagues, you have our continued support, the United Nations. We stand ready to help and to support this effort, and we look forward to continuing to work with all of you in the coming years. And finally, Nigel, all the best on your new endeavors. I'm sure you'll be making a splash wherever you go, and this will certainly not be the last COP that we will see you. And Mahmoud, again, thanks for your hard work. Ambassador Ayman, Egypt has delivered. You've truly delivered for Africa and for the developing world. I thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Hart, and I couldn't agree more. I'd like to also quote what you Excellency said in terms of how acting now on climate change is a moral obligation, and we all need all hands on deck, and we need to step up. So thank you. And I'd like to give it back to Ambassador Ayman to lead the final section of the event. Thank you.
Thank you, Mnaya, so much. And I would like to thank, of course, the high-level champions for all the work that been done in the past 9 months when Egypt decided to design and format the Egyptian initiatives on a number of climate actions. And thanks for Nigel Topping and Dr. Mahmoud Muhyiddin for their involvement on those initiatives. Dear delegates, it's now my pleasure to open the floor for interventions from parties. The first on my call roll, His Excellency Hyo Kim, Ambassador and Deputy Minister for Climate Change, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Republic of Korea, on behalf of the Environmental Integrity Group. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. First of all, I'd like to express my strong thanks to the Egyptian Presidency and UNFCCC Secretariat for organizing this very meaningful and inspiring session. And also, I'd like to extend my great appreciation to Her Excellency, Madame Mary Robinson, for moderating excellent panel discussion, which was a precious opportunity to listen to the views and voices of different non-state actor representatives. Mr. President and distinguished delegates, 1.5 degrees Celsius ambition and carbon neutrality by 2050 indeed needs whole of the society approach. We all know that it is very clear that parties only cannot achieve this goal, this demand. Therefore, every stakeholders must work together. That's why even at COP meetings, collaboration and partnership is a key agenda. In this global challenging but inevitable journey, we believe that the role of high-level champions is crucial and indispensable. Actually, high-level champions, they strongly contributed to strengthen and mainstreaming resilience. They mobilized climate finances, and they accelerate immediate actions like race to net zero, and they raised public awareness, and they advocate people's participation to strong climate action. Therefore, I would like to take this opportunity to deliver strong appreciation to climate champions for their excellent work done for last years. We all need more and stronger engagement of non-state actors in the adventure of climate action. Parties' negotiation cannot be separated with the voices of non-state actors, and parties must reflect the voices, views, and demands of non-state actor representatives in a proper way to make official decisions and recommendations. We also believe that more frequent communication between parties and non-state actors must be ensured. Therefore, in that exercise, we expect bigger leadership and role of climate champions. High-level champions activities must be continued, and particularly next year, we have huge tasks in front of us, such as global stocktake, GCF replenishment, and many others. We need a lot of inputs, contributions, voices from non-state actors. In that context, we expect bigger role and leadership by climate champions. Finally, climate champion, Mr. Nigel Topping. Thank you very much for your excellent work done for last 2 years. And although your official work as high-level champion for climate action of the UN, high-level champion of the climate action will end soon. However, I don't think that your dedication, your contribution, your activities to enhance climate action around the globe will end. Your work will continue, and we expect your stronger, bigger, and more active leadership at every corner of the globe in the future. So thank you again, and I wish all the best for your next journey. Mr. President and distinguished delegates, this is a wonderful session for sharing views and excellent works done by non-state actors with parties. And we hope that this tradition will continue even stronger at next COPs as well. So thank you very much, and I wish all the best to the climate action champions. Thank you.
Excellency, thank you for your intervention. Now I would like to give the floor to Ms. Ligia Castro Dinonos, Climate Change Director, Ministry of Environment of Panama, on behalf of the ILAC. You have the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, President. Distinguished ministers and delegates, Panama has the honour of delivering this statement on behalf of the ILAC countries. We thank you for this opportunity, and we appreciate the leadership shown by high-level championships. They are driving climate action around the world. The climate crisis threatens our society with disappearance. Decisions taken at this conference will define whether or not we have a prosperous future and a habitable planet. Latin America is particularly vulnerable to climate change. We came to COP27 with one mission: to fight for our survival, and lastly, return home with a clear path towards implementation. Whilst the climate crisis affects all nations and the vulnerable countries are the most affected, we need to join together to solve climate crisis. This is why our group wants an ambitious agenda, because we believe that the solution to this crisis must call on everyone. This is why we're pleased to see the new Sharm el-Sheikh adaptation agenda with a view to building resilience for 4 billion people by 2030. We're also pleased to see the efforts made through the campaigns led by the high-level champions, the 3 Rs. We also appreciate the achievements of the Marrakesh 5-year plan. One of the aspects is to improve connections for participation between state and non-state actors. We're sure that this will speed up transformative action in our cities, regions, companies, investors, and civil society, so that everyone is contributing to tackling the acute dangers facing vulnerable communities, so that we can see tangible progress. For our countries, these agendas are absolutely vital. We need to raise our level of ambition and ensure that we are in a position to achieve long-term goals. So effective implementation means that all stakeholders align their work plans, their investment plans at short, medium and long term, and that there be constant monitoring. This is why we call upon high-level champions to step up their efforts in the Latin American region, particularly in the ILAC countries. This is because we believe that the 2030 breakthroughs and sectoral plans must be aligned with transformation of the global system. One of the important points of the Agenda for Action is that it sends out a clear signal to the Secretariat and all stakeholders as to how we can work together to achieve the long-term goals of the Paris Agreement. For our region, tackling the global problem of climate change and achieve the target of 1.5 degrees and carbon neutrality as part of the Paris agreements continues to be the absolute priority. This means that we must have the highest level of ambition and commitment for transforming the systems at local, regional and national level. This must be done by government, but in close cooperation with the private sector and non-government sectors. We owe this to the planet from this privileged position. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your intervention. Now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Yushi Horo, Director of International Cooperation, Japan. Sir, you have the floor.
Good afternoon. First, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to UNFCCC climate champions for organizing this event focusing on non-state actors. I would like to say a few words from national government perspective, working closely with subnational government. Despite current climate and energy crisis, losing momentum on the path to carbon neutrality is not an option. The latest IPCC report highlighted that cities account for approximately 70% of global GHG emissions. Cities are standing at the front line of concrete actions against climate change and towards decarbonization. The Glasgow Climate Pact, adopted at COP26 last year, clearly stated local governments play an important role in achieving temperature goal of the Paris Agreement. Japan strongly believes local governments are one of the most important actors. We have been working with local governments in the transition towards carbon neutral cities while revitalizing local economy and well-being. As a concrete step, Japan will designate 100 or more decarbonization leading areas which strive to realize carbon neutrality by 2030, 20 years ahead of national target year of 2050. Demonstrated best practices in these areas are expected to be replicated across the country and beyond the border through international city-to-city collaboration. Japan will strengthen comprehensive collaboration with stakeholders, both domestically and internationally, to meet its own decarbonization targets while also contributing to its partners in achieving their targets. The decarbonization of subnationals is a significant challenge for Japan and the world, but we are determined to make it happen and show our leading models to the world in this critical decade. In order to achieve it, I hope to expand multi-level cooperation across the world. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you for your intervention. Now I give the floor to Ms. Milagros Sandoval, Director of Climate Change and Desertification, Ministry of Environment of Peru. Milagros, you have the floor.
Gracias.
Thank you. Unfortunately, Milagros has not been able to join us, but on behalf of Peru, I would like to thank the persistent efforts of the high-level champions for climate change, the representative of the British and Egyptian presidencies. It's thanks to your leadership that we've managed to speed up participation remarkably. We have raised the level of ambition of non-state parties in order to build a carbon-neutral society over the next decades. This is built on previous efforts, notably the Lima-Paris Action Plan under the joint presidencies of COP of Peru and France. We have included more and more non-state actors in building these resilient societies. We're confident that Race to Resilience and Race to Zero campaigns will continue to involve and mobilize more and more actors such as cities, regions, and civil society organizations, as well as companies. We would like to underscore the efforts of the Egyptian presidency and the high-level champions in launching the Sharm el-Sheikh adaptation agenda. This will bind together the efforts of states and non-state actors as we move towards COP28. So there is this constellation of actors which is increasingly taken on the leadership. The Peruvian government supports the Resilience Hub as one of the examples of this. So, Chair, we continue to fully support the valuable work of the high-level champions under the 5-year Marrakesh partnership. You can count on our constant support for implementation over the next few years. We're together for implementation. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your intervention. Now I would like to give the floor to Ms. Janet Trogan, the United Kingdom COP26 Regional Ambassador for Africa and the Middle East. Ms. Janet, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, colleagues, I'm delighted to attend this event and make this intervention today to acknowledge the inspiring work of the high-level champions and the Marrakesh partnership. What has been achieved through the global climate agenda is driving the ambition loop between parties and non-party stakeholders to strengthen and accelerate action across the pillars of the Paris Agreement. And the work of the Marrakesh Partnership is key to delivering the transformation we need across all sectors of our economies. The UK is pleased to have witnessed and played a part in the progress across this agenda over the last 3 years. The Race to Zero, the Race to Resilience, and the Glasgow Finance Alliance for Net Zero, launched during the UK's presidency, have driven a massive increase in the ambition and accountability of non-state actors in this process. We were delighted to collaborate with you last year on the Breakthrough Agenda, and we commend your continued efforts since COP26, as you have worked alongside the International Energy Agency and the International Renewable Energy Agency to move the work forward under this agenda. In particular, we welcome the announcements of the adaptation and resilience breakthroughs this year, as well as your continued work on finance through innovative regional fora, as well as the development of work under GFANZ. We're very grateful for the support provided to non-party stakeholders to enable their effective participation in the global stocktake events taking place this year and next in response to the mandate you received in the Glasgow Climate Pact. We want to reiterate our support for the improved Marrakesh Partnership published by the high-level champions last year and welcomed by parties at COP26. The 5-year plan has given the high-level champions, the Marrakesh Partnership and the broader climate action agenda, very clear direction and a solid foundation to continue this transformational work. To conclude, we commend the positive collaboration between the UK and Egypt high-level champions this year. We look forward to seeing how this agenda progresses through 2022 and 2023 under the Egyptian and the incoming UAE presidencies and encourage them to continue to drive the ambition loop further and faster. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador, for your intervention. Now I give the floor to Ms. Francesca Osvaldo, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Chile. Ms. Francesca, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished leaders, ministers, and delegates present. Chile would like to highlight and thank the hard and constant effort of the high-level champions, Nigel Tobin, representative of the UK President, and Mahmoud Mohiddin, representative of the Egyptian President, under whose leaderships and exponential accelerations has been achieving the participation, increased ambition, and action on non-state actors in reducing greenhouse gas emissions towards carbon neutrality and increasing adaptive capacity and resilience to the adverse effect of climate change. We consider it key to capitalize on the work done in recent years through the campaigns led by the high-level champions, Race to Zero and Race to Resilience, and we welcome the launch of the Sharm el-Sheikh Adaptation Agenda that will set the sectoral targets to reach the 4 billion people protected goal. We cannot stop at fancy speeches and empty words. We need to move towards strong and effective climate action. Climate change is an issue that involves us all as humanity, and it is the combined actions of all of us and all of the various sectors of our multiple societies that will give us a better world. That is why the work done by the high-level champions is so crucial and allow us to keep the flame of the 1.5 degrees ambition goal alive. Thank you.
Thank you for your intervention. Since I see no other parties would like to take the floor, we will continue the proceedings with the statements of the observers. I have on the top of my list Mr. Frank Coney, Mayor of City of Des Moines, USA, President of ICLEI, on behalf of the local governments and municipal authorities. Mr. Frank, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Dear colleagues in the Global Climate Action Agenda, I want to thank all the previous speakers for their strong interventions this evening. I serve as president of ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability, which serves as the local focal organization of the local governments and municipal authorities constituency to the UNFCCC. We, as the LGMA, are happy to know that the agenda, which is focusing on action, is moving forward in an inclusive process. It is now time for parties to make a bridge and process through partnership with non-state actors. By working with cities and regions, the action agenda can leverage the full power of multi-level action as an accelerating force for the second phase of the Paris Agreement. This new phase of Paris is implementation, and the local level is where implementation occurs. Only by ensuring that all levels of government collaborate can the action agenda reach its full potential. Thank you to the GCA for raising the bar. We now have clear signs of momentum, the first ministerial to bring the climate community together with the urban community shows that we can share one unifying vision. With this motivation, we go forward from here by opening a global climate stocktake that fully incorporates local level input. ICLEI and the LGMA embark into 2023 under the banner of Stocktake 4 Climate Emergency and will seek to engage more than 100 nations to host a stocktaking event in collaboration with their local and regional governments. This exercise sets a vision for not only where we are, but where we need to go that is equitable and just. Thank you again to the GCA, and let's together maintain our motivation and momentum from here on. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Because we have restriction in time, and invite observers to submit their written statements to the Secretariat. Now on the closing remarks, let me on behalf of His Excellency Minister Sameh Shukri, the COP President, to deliver it. Ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, I would like to thank party and non-party actors and our speakers for joining us today in the Global Climate Action High-Level event and for such insightful and inspiring discussions. Every day counts. We need to upscale actions from all stakeholders and to translate these actions into results on the ground. Then translate these results into tangible and impactful outcomes. It takes two to the success of global climate action: state and non-state actors. There is no room for solo players. Responsibility is shared, and hence accountability is shared as well. The unity of purpose reflected in the UNFCCC and in the Paris Agreement is the main driving force for us all in our joint journey to realize on the ground the slogan of COP27, Together for Implementation. By these remarks, I declare our meeting is closed, and I would like personally to thank Mr. Nigel Topping for his hard work, and of course we expect that you continue combating the climate change from your new position. Thank you, sir.